So many a time we hear that in a lot of masajid, in a lot of centers, majalis are disrupted because the time of salat arrives in the middle of a majlis or in the middle of matam, and it's stopped so people can pray. Is that something Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have commanded us to do? And it's really, is it that important that we be praying in the beginning of time, in the first, when the time of salah arrives, that we have to disrupt majalis and we have to conduct our congregational prayers? Let's ponder this question. We are not propagating here. First of all, let me clarify that we are not propagating that it is okay for people to do matam and not pray. That's absolutely not permissible. So there's no conflict between praying and matam, praying and programs of azah and mourning. There's no conflict. That conflict never arises because you don't do matam all day. Even if you do matam all day, you can take 10 minutes off to pray. That's all it takes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to pray. So there's no conceivable conflict between those two. And if somebody decides to do matam only and not pray, such a person is a despicable person and he is astray. Obviously, he's committing haram. Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam prayed on the day of Ashura, right? But we are not talking about that. So there is no conflict between azah and matam ever. There's no conflict between the two because you can do azah and matam because the time of namaz, time of salah is vast. It lasts few hours. So if I'm doing matam now, after 1 hour, 2 hours, my matam will finish and then I can pray. But what is the preferable way to do if there's conflict between azah and the awwalul waqt, the first initial moments when salah becomes permissible, and that is the most excellent time to pray. So which one has more fadila, which has more sawab? We are just addressing that question. Please understand that, okay? So I don't want anybody to misuse my words that I have said, okay, you can do azadari and not pray. I do not preach such a thing. In the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, first of all, we have to understand that every namaz, every salah, every prayer has two times. Two times. One is when it's permissible, the beginning of the time, when it's permissible to initiate their prayers, and one is the end. So it's the end, when after that salah would become qadha. And if you have not prayed until that time, then you have become a sinful person. That is true for morning prayers, for fajr prayers. That's true for dhuhr prayers, for asr prayers, maghrib and isha prayers, right? So every salah has a time slot. Sometimes it could be an hour, 20 minutes, an hour, 30 minutes, like fajr prayers. Sometimes it could be longer, like dhuhr prayers, which now lasts almost 8 hours, right? In some places it lasts 10 hours, 12 hours, from noon till sunset. So within that time you can pray. And maghrib the same way, isha the same way. So every salah has two time slots. That's number one. So why I'm saying this? Because when the time of salah arrives, it's not incumbent upon you to pray at that moment. And everybody understands that, right? It's not incumbent, it's not obligatory. If, for instance, if there's adhan right now, if right now there's the time of adhan, and I decide not to pray immediately, and I pray after half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, I've not committed a sin. It's permissible. It's less preferable. There's less reward for me if I delay my prayers by minutes or by hours. But I've not committed a sin as long as I have not transpired the time of salah. I have not crossed over from the time of salah. It has not become qadha. You understand that, right? So, first of all, every salah has two times. When it becomes permissible to pray, it becomes obligatory to pray. and then a time that becomes qada. Within those two time limits, you have to pray that namaz, that salah, and you do not have to pray it immediately, right? I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. So I don't have to show you a hadith in that regard. Now, let's ponder the question. If I'm now in a majlis, right? And there's mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We are crying. And this, at that moment, is the time of Adhan. Which has greater reward? That is the conceivable conflict that we have to respond to today. We have to explain today, right? I'm here, I'm sitting in a majlis and I'm crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or I'm doing matam for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. At that time, I hear Adhan. Now, is it more reward for me to stop my crying and go and pray, and then perhaps after that there's majlis, or there's majlis is ended, we don't know, right? Or is it more sawab for me, more reward for me, that I continue to cry for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, weep for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and express my mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, and then pray later? Which one has more sawab? Obviously, one should try to never face this kind of conflict. That should be our effort, especially people who organize majalis. They should be careful of this, that they should organize at such hours that perhaps either people pray before majlis, or majlis ends well before the time of Adhan. So this situation doesn't rise. But sometimes you cannot control. Sometimes things are delayed. You cannot start on time. So the Adhan happens during majlis, or during the matam procession, during the julus. Which one has greater sawab? So in the light of ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, first of all, let me again explain this, okay? If there is no conflict, then obviously, if there's no conflict, for instance, I can go first pray and then join the matam. If I have that option, right? Of course, that's better. Of course, I pray first, and then majlis starts after half an hour. Of course, in such situation, there is no conflict. So, of course, I pray first, and then I go to do majlis. But we are not talking about that. We are talking about, for instance, I enter a masjid, and there is a majlis going on. And at that moment, or after 2 minutes, there will be Adhan. Which has greater sawab? I sit with the majlis and cry for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or I go and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which has greater sawab? Which has greater reward in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So, to answer this question, there is no comparison, my dear brethren, between the reward of prayers and reward of crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It's day and night. There is no comparison. Of course, the reward for crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam far exceeds the rewards of praying in the beginning of time. In the beginning of time. Okay? We are not comparing Salatul Jama'ah. Salatul Jama'ah with please understand, we are not comparing Salatul Jama'ah, praying in congregation, with Azaa of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Because congregation, there's no conflict between congregational prayers and Azaa of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You can always have congregation after half an hour, after 2 hours, right? Later, after the majlis, you can have congregation. The only thing that can have a conflict is the beginning of the time. Awwalul waqt, with the Azaa of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. So in order to answer this, let me show you some ahadith with regard to praying in the beginning of time, the amount of thawab that's reserved for a person who prays in the beginning of the time of namaz, right? Although it's not wajib, Aimma alayhim as-salatu wasalam have done this. There are many instances that they did not pray in the beginning of the time of namaz. There are many ahadith to that effect. It's not wajib, but if a person prays in the beginning of the time, what rewards await him? Okay. And this is after my research that I have found the almost generous ahadith with respect to promising generous and extensive and expansive rewards for praying in the beginning of the time. Look, this is the book of Al-Furu' min al-Kafi lil-Kulayni rahmatullahi alayh, Tab'u Dar al-Kutub al-Islamiyya, page number 268. This hadith pertains to the prayers in the beginning of the time. Okay. إن الصلاة إذا ارتفعت في أول وقتها رجعت إلى صاحبها وهي بيضاء مشرقة تقول. If a person prays his namaz, his salah, he offers his prayers in the beginning of the time, this flies up. This namaz, this salat goes up, and then it returns. It is shining. It has white illumination. It's shining with white light. And it says, حفظتني حفظك الله. You protected me. May Allah protect you. Namaz, salat says for this person. وإذا ارتفعت في غير وقتها بغير حدودها. And if a salat flies up after its time, يعني it is made qaza. وبغير حدودها. And all the requirements of salah have not been fulfilled. Its requirements have been violated. So you pray without clean clothes, or without wuzu, or with a faulty wuzu. So such a salah. رجعت إلى صاحبها. It comes to it's the person who has prayed. It comes back and says, وهي سوداء مظلمة. And this prayer is dark, right? Dark. And it says, ضيعتني ضيعك الله. You wasted me, may Allah waste you. So in this hadith, a person who prays in the beginning of the time, his salah is most complete, and it's very blessed, and it goes up and comes back and prays for the human being. And if you make your salah qada after the time and you have not fulfilled its requirements, then it comes back and it's black and it's dark and it curses you. Okay. This is من لا يحضره الفقيه by شيخنا الصدوق رحمه الله. من لا يحضره الفقيه لشيخنا الصدوق, volume number 1, published by دار التعارف. Here we go, page number 206, and this is hadith number 643. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to say, من حبس نفسه على صلاة فريضة ينتظر وقتها. A person who forces himself to wait for the time of salah. So he catches the salah in its initial time, in its beginning of the time. So you wait half an hour, 20 minutes before Adhan, you wait. Okay, now salat is going to come. In anticipation of the time, you wait. So you pray in the beginning of the time. فَأَتَمَّ رُكُوعَهَا. And you perform full ruku', complete, perfect ruku'. وَسُجُودَهَا وَخُشُوعَهَا. And you perform full, complete, perfect sajda. And you maintain complete khushu', fear of Allah, remembrance of Allah throughout the prayers. And that's not easy. And such people are very few who do this, right? This is not available for every person. Azaif Imam Hussein alayhi salam is available for every person to shed tears. But doing this is very difficult. Very difficult, especially to maintain khushu' throughout the to maintain the remembrance and fear of Allah and the sacred feeling of being watched over by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the prayers. That's not easy. ثم مجد الله عز وجل وعظمه وحمده حتى يدخل وقت صلاة أخرى. And then this person does not get up. He stays in his masjid, in his musalla, and he continues to pray, continues to do tasbih, and says praise of Allah until the time of next prayer arrives. Okay? لم يلغ بينهما. And he does not لم يلغ بينهما. لم يلغ بينهما. And he does not commit any vain act between that time, between the first prayer and second prayer. كتب الله له كأجر الحاج والمعتمر وكان من أهل عليين. Allah Ta'ala grants him the thawab, the reward of a person who performs Hajj and a person who performs Umrah, and he will be amongst the Aliyin, amongst the people of very high status. But we all know that this is very difficult. This is not possible for most people. That you wait for the prayer, right? And then when the time of the prayer comes, you do a complete ruku and sujood, and you maintain khushu. And then you do not exit the spot. You stay there. And you say zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and don't do anything worldly until the next time of next prayer arrives. Then Allah writes you as a Hajj, as a Mu'tamir, gives you the thawab of Hajj and Umrah, and you are from Ahli Ali. Okay, whoever does that, alhamdulillah, good for him. Great for him. But we know that this is not easy. This is not possible for most people. Let's consider some more ahadith about the thawab of praying in the beginning of the time. And I'm not trying to hide anything from you. It's not that there are ahadith about praying in the beginning of the time of tremendous thawab, right? And I'm hiding them. No, I'm not hiding anything. I've done research and I'm giving you whatever I found. Okay, this is Wasa'il al-Shi'ah, volume number 4, Kitab al-Salah, أبواب المواقيت باب استحباب الصلاة في أول الوقت. It is preferable to pray in the أول الوقت, in the beginning of the time of namaz. Okay. First hadith from Al-Musa Al-Kadhim عليه السلام. الصلوات المفروضات في أول وقتها إذا أقيم حدودها أطيب ريحا من قضيب الآس حين يؤخذ من شجرة في طيبه وريحه وطراوته. Al-Imam عليه السلام said, when you pray in the beginning of the time, it's more fragrant. It's more fragrant than the tree of As. I don't know what tree is that in English. The tree of As, when its branches picked, and it's fresh and it has great fragrance. Therefore, you have to pray in the beginning of the time. That's the thawab of praying in the beginning of time. Okay. إذا دخل وقت الصلاة فتحت أبواب السماء لصعود الأعمال فما أحب أن يسعد عمل أول من عملي ولا يكتب في صحيفة أحد أول مني. فما أحب أن يسعد عمل أول من عملي ولا يكتب في الصحيفة أحد أول مني. Okay. This hadith is from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. He says that when the time of salah arrives, the doorways of heavens opens, and at that time, I want to be the first person whose salah goes up. And no other person's name is written there before me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees this person prayed before anybody else. So this is the reward of a person who prays in the beginning of the time. And there are some other hadith about reward of praying in the beginning of the time. Jibreel alayhi salam said to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أفضل الوقت أوله. The most excellent time for praying, the one that has most reward, is the beginning of the time of namaz. So these are the rewards for praying in the beginning of the time. Okay. In Mustadrak al-Wasail also there are some ahadith, but I read to you the most generous of all these ahadith with regard to praying in the beginning of the time. Now let's consider the aza of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The ahadith with regard to aza of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now, this conflict could only arise if because of namaz, I'm going to miss aza, right? If I'm not going to miss aza, then there's no conflict. Please bear with me. If the situation is such that I can pray quickly, and then I could join the aza, that's doable, that's fine, that's great. But if it's such that there's majlis going on, and aza comes, and you disrupt the majlis, cancel the majlis, and you start namaz jama'at, salatul jama'ah, and then after that, people are not going to cry because you canceled it. If you had not canceled it, for the next 20 minutes, people would be still crying. People will still be weeping for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. If you had not disrupted the majlis, for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, people will be weeping and crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now that you cut it off, people are going to go make wuzu and pray, and after that, there is no majlis after that. So in that situation, there is conflict, right? So Now let's consider if we did this. We just did that, right? There was a majlis going on. People were crying heavily for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We stopped it. And we said there's a thing greater with greater thawab, greater importance than that's praying in the beginning of the time. Okay. Now let's consider what we have lost. What we have lost and what we have gained. The hadith of Azaf Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Now, this is Kamil al-Ziyarat. Inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. And this will be our Zikr al-Masaib also for this program. Kamil al-Ziyarat by Shaykhuna Ibn Qulawayh al-Qummi rahmatullahi alayh. One of the four most reliable books of Shia. This is chapter 26, hadith number 219 from Al-Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Ya Zurara, inna as-sama'a bakat ala al-Husayni 40 sabahan bid-dam. The heavens, Zurara, when Al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam was martyred, the heavens wept blood for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There tears of blood. For 40 days, people in the skies, people in the heavens, the inhabitants of the higher worlds, they were all weeping blood for 40 days. وَإِنَّ الْأَرْضَ بَكَتْ 40 سَبَاحًا بِالسَّوَادِ. And the earth cried for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam with dark tears for 40 days. وَإِنَّ الشَّمْسَ بَكَتْ 40 سَبَاحًا بِالْكُسُوفِ وَالْحُمْرَةِ. And the sun wept for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam through eclipse and through redness for 40 days. وَإِنَّ الْجَبَالَ تَقَطَّعَتْ وَانْتَثَرَتْ وَإِنَّ الْبِحَارَ تَفَجَّرَتْ. Mountains crumbled down in the morning of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, and oceans raged with the storms in the عزاء of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَةَ بَكَتْ 40 صَحَابَاحًا عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ alayhi salam. And angels wept for 40 days for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وَمَا اخْتَثَبَتْ مِنَّا امرأة ولا ادهنت ولا اكتحلت ولا رجلت حتى أتانا رأس عبيد الله ibn Ziyad. And in the house of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu wasalam, no woman ever dyed her hair or put a kuhl, surma on her eyes, nor she ever, any woman put on any ornament, any jewelry, until Ubaydillah ibn Ziyad was killed and his head was sent to us. وَمَا زِلْنَا فِي عِبْرَةٍ بَعْدَ. And still, our tears have not ceased for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Our cries have not ceased for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وَكَانَ جَدِّي إِذَا ذَكَرَهُ بَكَى. And I remember my grandfather, Ali ibn al-Hussein, Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. He would always remember his father. Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam always remember his father. And whenever he remembered and he mentioned his father, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he would cry. He would weep. حَتَّى تَمْلَوْ عَيْنَاهُ لَحْيَتَهُ. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam would cry so much that his weeps, his tears would wet his holy beard. وَحَتَّى يَبْكِي لِبُكَائِهِ رَحْمَةً لَهُ مَنْ رَأَى. And anybody who would see him, Al-Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin alayhi, he would cry with such pain. He would cry from the bottom of his soul with such pain, with such sorrow, with such mourning, that anybody who saw him, they would also cry with his cries, with his weeps. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَةَ الَّذِينَ عِنْدَ قَبْرِهِ لَيَبْكُونَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned angels that are always around the shrine of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And they always cry. They always weep. They're always in mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. فَيَبْكِي لِبُكَائِهِمْ كُلُّ مَنْ فِي الْهَوَاءِ وَالسَّمَاءِ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. These angels are so mournful. They weep with such pain, with such sorrow, that other angels, when they see these angels crying in such a way, they also start weeping for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وَلَقَدْ خَرَجَتْ نفسه عليه السلام فزفرت جهنم زفرة كادت الأرض تنشق لزفرتها. When Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam took his last breath, when Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam was martyred, he took his last breath. Jahannam took out a sigh. Jahannam sighed. Jahannam breathed out. كادت الأرض كادت الأرض تنشق لزفرتها. It was so intense. It was near the earth would explode and would be torn asunder because of this breath of Jahannam. ولقد خرجت نفس عبيد الله بن زياد ويزيد بن معاوية فشهقت جهنم شحقة لولا أن الله حبسها بخزانها لأحرقت من على ظهر الأرض من فورها. And when Ubaidillah ibn Marjana la'natullahi alayh was killed, Jahannam was so happy. It made a loud scream out of happiness. And that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Jahannam's khuzan, Jahannam's angels who control Jahannam, if they had not controlled it, that scream of Jahannam with its heat would have burnt everything on earth. ولو يؤذن لها ما بقي شيء إلا ابتلعته ولكنها مأمورة مصفودة. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows Jahannam, it would swallow everything on earth. Everything on earth. All the sinful, all the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. However, Jahannam cannot cross Allah's boundaries. ولقد عتت على الخزان غير مرة حتى أتاه جبرائيل فضربها بجناحها فسكنت. The angels who are assigned to Jahannam, many a time, several times, it has quarreled with those angels that allow me to swallow all the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, that I bring them in. Allow me. So Jahannam has disputed with them, those angels, and quarreled with them. So Allah has dispatched Jibreel alayhi salam to talk to Jahannam, and Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam has slapped the back of with his wing, slapped Jahannam to calm down, to wait for its time. وإنها لتبكيه وتندبه وإنها لتتلظى على قاتله. Jahannam cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and says Noha of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and says Noha for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and its fires are raging in expectation of the coming of the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. ولولا من على الأرض من حجج الله لنقضت الأرض وكفثت بما عليها وما تكثر الزلزال إلا عند اقتراب الساعة. And if it were not for Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam that are on earth, the only thing that stops Jahannam for not swallowing this earth is because of the Imam Ma'asum alayhi salam is on earth. If it was not for him, Jahannam would swallow the earth. وما من عين أحب إلى الله ولا عبرة من عين بكت ودمعت عليه. There is no eye more beloved before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no tear that's shed from any eye that's more beloved before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that eye which cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and the tear that's shed for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وما من باك يبكيه إلا وقد وصل فاطمة عليها السلام. And every person who cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, any person who cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, and does Noha for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and mourns Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he does an act of kindness. He is extending his condolence to Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha wa as'adaha alayh, and he makes Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha happy salamullahi alayh. wa wasala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa adda haqqana. Any person who cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, he has done an act of kindness to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to us, and he has and he has fulfilled his obligation towards us. وما من عبد يحشر إلا وعيناه باكية إلا الباكين على جد الحسين عليه السلام. Every person who comes on the day of judgment, his eyes are crying, full of tear, full of sorrow, except those people who have cried for Imam Hussein عليه السلام. فإنه يحشر وعينه قريرة والبشارة تلقاه. Such a person who was in this dunya, in this life, he has cried for Imam Hussein عليه السلام. He has cried for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He comes on the day of judgment. His face is blessed with gaiety, with happiness. And he is met with glad tidings. وَالسُّرُورُ بَيِّنٌ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. And there is happiness on his face. وَالْخَلْقُ فِي الْفَزَعِ وَهُمْ آمِنُونَ. All people would be in great terror. And such a person, he would be safe and sound and secure. وَالْخَلْقُ يُعْرَضُونَ وَهُمْ حُدَّاثُ الْحُسَيْنِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. People would be taken to give account for their actions. People will be taken to give accounts for their actions. Yet, those people who have wept for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they will be in the company of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and conversing with their beloved Imam Hussein alayhi salam. تحت العرش, in the shadow of the throne of the Lord, وفي ظل العرش لا يخافون سوء الحساب. They are not even worried about any hisab. They are not worried about any accountability before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يقال لهم ادخلوا الجنة فيأبون ويختارون مجلسه وحديثه. Angels come to them and say to them, come, enter paradise, enter Jannah. They said no. They said no, Imam Hussein alayhi salam is here. We wept in the dunya for his love. We wept in the dunya for his pain. Now Imam Hussein alayhi salam is here. We are talking to him how we could leave him and go to paradise. وإن الحور لترسل إليهم إنا قد اشتقناكم مع الولدان المخلدين. Inhabitants of the paradise, their wives, their spouses from the paradise. They send messages to them that we are waiting for you. We are desperately waiting for you. We're anxiously waiting for you. Your servants are here in paradise. They're waiting for you. They're desperate for you. Please come. فما يرفعون رؤوسهم إليه لما يرون في مجلسهم من السرور والكرامة. There's so much dignity in the majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of judgment. In that gathering, in that mahfil of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This mahfil is for whom? For people who cried in this dunya for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There's so much dignity, there's so much happiness, there's so much blessings of Allah in that mahfil, in that gathering, that when the message from Hur and Wildanul Mukhalladun and the inhabitants of the paradise comes to them, they do not even look at that message. They do not pay any attention to it. وَإِنَّ أَعْدَاءَهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ مَصْحُوبٍ بِنَاصِيَتِهِ إِلَى النَّارِ وَمِنْ قَائِلٍ مَا لَنَا مِنْ شَافِعِينَ وَلَا صَدِيقٍ حَمِيمٍ. And their enemies, they are being grabbed from their foreheads towards Jahannam. And there are their enemies who cry and say, today there's no one to rescue us, no one to support us. وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَرَوْنَ مَنْزِلَهُمْ مَا يَقْدِرُونَ أَن يُدَانُوا إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَصِلُونَ إِلَيْهِمْ. And the enemies of these lovers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam see with their own eyes where the lovers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and weepers for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and mourners for Imam Hussein alayhi salam are. Such exalted, lofty majlis, mahfil that they are in, but they cannot reach there. They cannot get close to them. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَةَ لَا تَأْتِيهِمْ بِالرِّسَالَةِ مِنْ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ وَمِنْ خُدَّامِهِمْ عَلَى مَا أُعْتُوا مِنَ الْكَرَامَةِ فَيَقُولُونَ نَأْتِيكُمْ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ فَيَرْجِعُونَ إِلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ مِنْ مَقَالَاتِهِمْ فَيَزْدَادُونَ إِلَيْهِمْ شَوْقًا. Angels come to them that your spouses, your family members are waiting for you in paradise. Please come. They respond to the angels, yes, inshallah, we will come. So angels return to paradise and they tell their family members, their spouses, that they have promised to come. So their anxiety even increases in paradise. And the angels tell them that they are sitting in the Majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They are sitting and they are having conversation with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. فَيَزْدَادُونَ إِلَيْهِمْ شَوْقًا. Their love, their anxiety even increases for them. فيقولون الحمد لله الذي كفانا الفزع الأكبر وأهوال القيامة ونجانا مما كنا نخاف. And they say, thanks to our Lord, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved us from the great terror of the day of judgment. Abu Basir says, I was with Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam mentioned Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. And then the conversation continued. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam, this is another hadith. He says, Ya Abu Basir, أما تحب أن تكون في من يسعد فاطمة عليه السلام? Abu Basir, do you want to be one of those people who make Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha happy? Do you want to be one of those people who please Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha? فبكيت حين قالها فما قدرت على المنطق. Abu Basir says, when Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam said this, I started crying. I cried so profusely, so extensively that I was not able to talk. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam asked me that. Do you want to be one of those people who please Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha? وما قدرت على كلامي من البكاء. I was crying and I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak any words. ثم قال إلى المصلي يدعو فخرجت من عنده على تلك الحال. And this is hadith about people who cry for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Because it was long, I didn't read all of the hadith. Look at this hadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. He said to Abu Harun al-Makfuf, ومن ذكر الحسين عليه السلام عنده فخرج من عينيه من الدموع مقدار جناح ذباب كان ثوابه على الله عز وجل ولم يرضى له بدون الجنة. Whoever hears Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he hears the mention of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and his eyes become tearful to the level of a mosquito's wing. Tear comes to his eyes in the same measure as a mosquito's wing, so small a tear. كان ثوابه على الله عز وجل. Such a person has reward before Allah. And the least of his reward is Jannah. ولم يرضى له بدون الجنة. Or the least of his reward is Jannah. سمعت علي بن الحسين عليه السلام من قطرت عيناه فينا قطرة ودمعت عيناه فينا دمعة بوأه الله بها في الجنة غرفا يسكنها أحقابا. Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin alayhi salam says that any person who sheds a tear for us and his eyes become tearful for us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala بوأه الله في الجنة غرفا يسكنها أحقابا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him residence in the palaces of Jannah where he will live forever and ever and ever. So praying in the beginning of time has its rewards, but it's not comparable to Aza of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. If because of praying in the beginning of time, we are going to miss Majlis, then we can, the prayer can wait. After 1 hour, 2 hours, we can pray. We don't have to pray in the beginning of the time. This reward cannot be missed because this reward, nothing can replace this reward, as it's quite clear. This hadith is from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, إن الحسين مع أبيه وأمه وأخيه في منزل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam is with his father. Where is Hussein alayhi salam? Right now he's at the house of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam with his father Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. And wa ummihi, with his mother Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha. And wa akhihi, when his brother Imam Hassan alayhi salam. أصحاب الكساء الخمسة الطيبة, they are all with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَمَعَهُ يُرْزَقُونَ وَيُحْبَرُونَ, they live and reside with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَإِنَّهُ لَعَنْ يَمِينِ الْعَرْشِ مُتَعَلِّقٌ بِهِ يقول, Rasulullah, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam is on the right side of the throne of the Lord, Arsh. And he puts his hand on the Arsh of Allah. And he prays to Allah. And besieges Allah. And addresses Allah in these words. And says, Ya Rabbi anjiz li ma wa'adtani. O Lord, please fulfill that promise that you have given me. وَإِنَّهُ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَى زُوَّارِهِ. Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam looks and watches over his visitors, his za'irin. His za'irin could be from his clothes, and his za'irin who come to his Husayniyah, his za'irin who come to his majalis. Imam Hussein looks at, sees all of them. وَإِنَّهُ أَعْرَفُ بِهِمْ وَبِأَسْمَائِهِمْ وَأَسْمَاءِ آبَائِهِمْ. And all those people who come with love to Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam's house, with sincerity, with love, with devotion. Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam looks at them and watches over them, and he knows each one of them. He knows each one. He knows their names. He knows the names of their fathers. وَمَا فِي رِحَالِهِمْ. He knows what's their condition in their household, what they have in their storages. He knows everything about them. مِنْ أَحَدِهِمْ بِوَلَدِهِ. He knows everyone and each one of them better than he knows his own son. The way you know your son, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam knows his devotees more and better and closer than we know our sons. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَنْظُرُ إِلَى مَنْ يَبْكِيهِ. And whoever cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam looks at him, فَيَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهِ, and says, Ya Allah, he's crying for me, he loves me, Ya Allah, forgive his sins. Ya Allah, forgive his sins. وَيَسْأَلُ أَبَاهُ الْإِسْتِغْفَارَ لَهُ. And he turns to his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi. He says, Ya Abata, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Fatih Khaybar, Yadullah, Wajhullah, Aynullah, Jambullah, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. My father, I'm proud of you, I love you. These are my Shia, these are my lovers, these are my devotees. They are weeping, they are crying, they are screaming. In remembrance of your son Hussein, of your son Hussein. وَيَسْأَلُ أَبَاهُ الْإِسْتِغْفَارَ لَهُ. He says, Father, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you ask Allah to forgive them. وَيَقُولْ أَيُّهَا الْبَاكِ. Then Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam turns to that person who is crying for him, who's weeping for him, and says, أَيُّهَا الْبَاكِ. He says, you love me, my lover, my friend, my son. You love me, I love you. You cry for me. Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, أَيُّهَا الْبَاكِ. O person who loves me, I love you. I wish you knew how much reward you have treasured for yourself. لو علمت ما عد الله لك. If you knew the rewards that are waiting for you because you love Hussein alayhi salam. You remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam. لفرحت أكثر مما حزنت. You would be so happy that you would forget your sorrow, your mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. وإنه ليستغفر له من كل ذنب وخطيئة. Then Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam turns to Allah and says, Ya Allah, all this person, all his mistakes, all his errors, all his sins, he mentions them one by one. Ya Allah, forgive all of them. So
This is the reward for crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Praying in the beginning of time of namaz is an obligation. Not an obligation that you have to perform, but it's quite emphasized upon to do it. And we have to do it when we don't have anything else to do. But if there's a majlis of aza of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, which has one has greater reward. Crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam or praying in the beginning of time. Of course, there's no comparison. There's no comparison between the two. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the Iman, grant us the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. And may He bless our hearts with devotion for Imam Hussein alayhi salam.